recording? Okay, so we've been looking at these sequences, and then we were able to create a list. Right? We call it geometric sequence. We call it just a list. We've been just working with a list so far. Now we're actually going to learn how to graph it. We learned the first semester how to graph lines. Now these are actually going to look like a curve. We call this exponential equation, right? The variable, the x is in an exponent. But just going back to how to do the list, I go here and I said, all right, my initial number is this number by itself. So if I wanted to create a list, my first number is a 2. Right? I think by now you guys should be like, all right, Mr. Leonzo, I know how to get the list. Like I said, it's going to be very important. And then this number with the exponent, that's a ratio, right? The number I'm going to multiply each time I want the next number. So if I just want to create a list, I know my next number is a 4 because I multiply by 2. My next number will be 8, 16, 32, and I can go on and on and on, right? I can continue with my list. Now, one cool thing is that every time we're going to go to the right, we multiplied. The ratio is the number we multiplied. But interesting is that what if I want to make my list bigger on the left? What if I want to go towards the left? I'm going, in this case, I'm going to divide by my ratio. If you notice, if I start on the 32, if I divide it by the ratio, so if I divide it by 2, I get 16. Divided by 2, I get 8. Divided by 2, I get 4. Divided by 2, I get 2. And I could even extend it even more. 1, and that's 1/2, 1/4, on and on. So I could even extend it, but let me come back to how the list started. Now here, I'm going to be able to graph these. And the list is what I actually am going to be using. But now my list, let me do it going down. My first number was a 2. So let me put a 2 here. And then a 4, my 8, my 16, my 32. And like I said, I could continue. I'm doing my list vertical. I know I have to come out with points. And I remembered back in the days when you guys did lines, when you guys did linear equations, you guys starting point was on the y-axis. The x value of my starting point is going to be 0. That gives me a point. My next value is going to be a 1 for my x value, and then a 2, and then a 3, and then a 4, and I can continue on and on and on. Notice how the x values are easy to come out with. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And like I said, I can continue. The y values, that comes from my list. So you guys might come and say, well, how does this help me? I'm just going to plot those two. There's 5 points there. I'm just going to plot them in. 1 point is the point 0, 2. Right, we know how to plot points. Another point is the point 1, 4. Then I have 2, 8. I have 3, 16ths. Now 4 and 32 is way, way outside of my graph, so I'm not going to be able to do it. But I mentioned I could have come out with points to begin with, right? On my y values to go up, let me divide. Let me divide by the ratio. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. And then my y values, they're going to be negatives. -1, -2. So the interesting part is that I'm going to get this point, this point. So that gives me a very good idea how my graph looks like. My graph, let me just go through my points the best that I can. My graph will never cross the x-axis. It just gets close to it. I can make it cross the x-axis if I come over it, and at the equation, at the end of my equation, I can put like a plus something or minus something. That's going to make me cross the x-axis. But for today, I'm not going to add those. I'm just going to keep it simple. my graph is not going to cross the x-axis ever. Notice how it looks like a curve. All right, let me take a look at number 34. If I wanted to create my list, I want to say 1/4 is my first number. All right, I can deal with fractions. That's not a big deal. My ratio in this case is 2. So my second number is 2/4, which is, we call it just 1/2. The second number, the next number, right? 1/2 times 2 is just 1. Notice I'm multiplying by 2 to come out with the next number. My next number is 2. My next number is 4. I can even have 8, 16, 32, right? My ratio. I can continue with my list as far as I want to, but I think I have enough points. My first point, my first y value is 1/4. My second y value, notice I'm writing my list going down. 1/2. My next number was a 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. So notice I have my list going down. Now here, my first point, my x value is 0. Second point, my x value is 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and 6, right? The x value is easy to get. The y value, that's basically what we've been working with. Now the x value is easy. 0 and 1/4, that's about here. My 1.5, 1 on the x value, half on the y, that's about here. 2, 1, 3, 2, right? I can just plug in the points. My 0.58, my 0.616. I can easily plot the points that I need. That gives me a good idea how my graph looks like. It looks like a curve. It will always look like a curve. Now, let's take a look at the next numbers. 35. I know my initial number is 1/3. If I'm looking at my list, is 1/3. My ratio is 3. So in order for me to come up with the next number, let me multiply by 3. So 1/3 times 3 is just 1, times 3, times 3, times 3. And I think that's enough. So I'm going to come up with points. My y value of my first point is 1/3. My second point is 1, 3, 9, 27. Notice how I did again my list vertical. The x value of my first point is 0. And then 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. And once again, until I need to. The x value is easy to get. So I'm just going to plot this point, 0 and 1/3. That's about there. 0.11, then 2, 3, and then the 0.39. The 0.427, I don't have a space for that. It's just way, way out there. So I'm going to say this graph starts very, very low, eventually crosses that point, and then it takes a big turn. Boom, it looks like that. Now you guys can see why I've been pushing for the list. All right, let's take a look at number 36, the list. The list is easy to make. My first number should be a 4. My ratio is 2. So in order for me to come up with the next number, I'm going to multiply by 2. So 4 times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, and then 32, and then on and on. So I want to create my list. My list is going to help me come up with points. I'm going to do 4, 8, 16, 32. Notice I did my list going down. From my point, my first point, My X value, my first point is 0, and then 1, and then 2, and then 3, on and on. Again, the X values are easy to get. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, as far as you need to go. So that gives me points. My first point is 0, 4, and then 1, 8, and then 2, 16. 332, yeah, I'm not going to be able to graph that. So I'm going to say, all right, this thing starts from very close to X, doesn't cross the X axis, and it's going to go like this. I'm not quite done yet. One thing I want to push for. Notice that the graphs going from left to right, right? We always read the graphs from left to right. Notice that they all kept on going up. Every time my ratio is more than 1, which is the case that happened here, when my ratio is more than 1, my graph goes up. So we call that increasing. Right? So every time my ratio is more than 1, it goes up. When my ratio is less than 1, let me take a look at number 37. As you guys will expect, we call it decay. Decay means it is going to go down. That's what I will expect. Now, my initial number is 4. I'm going to start here a little bit to the right. My initial number is 4. My ratio is 1/2. Okay, so I have to multiply by 1/2. I'm going to say, all right, let me start by multiplying. 4 times 1/2 gives me 2. 2 times 1/2 gives me 1. And then 1/2, and then 1/4, and then 1/8. Gets really, really ugly towards the end. It will never reach 0, but it just keeps on getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So instead, let me not go to the right. Instead, I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to start with 4. That's my initial number. But instead of going to the right where I have to multiply, let me go to the left where I have to divide. Back in the days, we learned that when we divide by a fraction, it's kind of like multiplying by the reciprocal. Fancy word, reciprocal. When we divide by a fraction, it's kind of like dividing by multiplying by the reciprocal. Multiplying by the reciprocal. Reciprocal means you flip it. Your fraction, instead of 1/2, is going to be 2/1. We're going to multiply by 2 backwards. So I'm going to say, all right, it's easy to come up with the list backwards. Technically, I'm dividing by 2. But remember, when you divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. And again, reciprocal means you flip the fraction, right? 2/1 is 2. So notice I multiply by 2 going backwards. All right, so how am I going to do this? So my number is going to be here. My initial number is 4, but I'm going backwards. So my list is going to go up. Here's an 8, here's a 16, here's a 32. I know my first value, my initial point, the X value is always 0. But in this case, because I went backwards, my X values are going to be negative now. -1, -2, -3, on and on. When I have a fraction as my ratio, I go backwards. Instead of going to the right on my list, I go to the left. So that gives me the point 0, 4, -1, 8, -2, 16. And now -3, 32, I'm not going to have that. But when I see this, my graph, it is going down now. And eventually goes close to the x-axis. More like right here. Notice how my graph is going down. Okay, let's take a look at number 38. My initial number is 3. That's the first number on my list. So let me put my 3 here. And I know that if I go to the right on my list, I have to multiply by the ratio. I have to multiply by 1/2, right? 3 times 1/2, and then times 1/2 times 1/2. Gonna get annoying. So instead, I'm gonna go backwards. I divide by 1/2, but we just said dividing by 1/2 is the same thing as multiplying by 2, right? Because I do the reciprocal. I flip my fraction. All right, so here my numbers are going to be 6, 12, 24, 48. Notice I started at 3, but I'm multiplying by 2 to the left. I can always go in my list to the left. I'm multiplying by 2, multiplying by the reciprocal. Just one thing you have to remember though, your initial point is 3. That's your initial value. All right, that's this one. The x value of that is always 0. Always. Now I went backwards, so I'm going to do my list going up. Here is 6. My y values are 6, 12, 24, 48. But my x values now are going to be negatives, but I'm going up. So -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. My first number, -448, I don't even have room for that. -324, again, I don't have room for that one either. Now, -212, that one I can graph. -212 is right there. -16 is right there. 0.3 is right there. So it gives me a very, very good idea how the graph is going to look like. It is dropping dramatically. It's dropping down really fast. And then all of a sudden, it starts going really slow. Eventually, it looks like it keeps on going closer and closer to x, but it will never cross it. Okay, so let's take a look at here. My initial number is 1/2. I'm going to create my list here, 1/2. And my ratio is 1/3. So if I know if I go to the right, I have to multiply it by 1/3. And forget that. 1/2 times 1/3 is 1/6 times 1/3. It's gonna get ugly. Instead, I'm gonna go backwards. But instead of dividing by 1/3, because in this case I divide by the ratio, I see this as multiplying by 3. Right? Dividing by a fraction is basically multiplying by the ratio, by the reciprocal. Notice I flip my fraction. All right, 1/2 times 3. Well, it's 3/2. And still not that nice, but 3/2, which is like 1.5. And then 3/2 times 3, or 1.5 times 3, gives me 9/2, which is like about 4.5. And still not that nice. And then 9/2 times 3 is 27/2. So roughly my numbers, when I see this as a decimal, my initial number is 0.5. Right, that's 1/2. My other number, it's about 1.5, right? 3/2. 9/2 is 4.5. Right, 9 divided by 2. 27/2 is like 13.2. I mean 13.5. I know they're kind of ugly, but hey, we can deal with those. This is why the list is very, very important. It's easy to graph. I know my initial point is 0. And again, I'm going backwards, so my numbers are going to be negatives. -1, -2, -3. So -3, 13.5. That is right there. -2, 4.5. -1, 1.5. And then 0, 0.5. Notice I'm graphing those points. And I can connect my points to have an idea how my graph looks like. Okay, so now let's take a look at number 40. My last example. My initial number is 1/3. My ratio is 1/3 as well. If I want to go to the right, I have to multiply by 1/3. And yeah, it's gonna not be nice. If I want to go backwards, I have to divide by 1/3, which is also same thing as multiplying by 3. When you divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm gonna go backwards instead. 1/3 times 3 is 3/3, which is better known as 1 times 3 times 3. And then I could even go times 3. So my initial number was 1/3. And I know the x value of that one is 0. Right? My first point is easy to get. My other y values, I'm going to be going up because I went backwards. My y values are 1, 3, 9, 27. Now my x values, because I went backwards, are going to be in the negatives. -1, -2, -3, -4. Now this big number, -427, I don't have space in the graph. So I'm not going to be able to plot that one in. But -3, 9, I can. -2, 3, that's a 3. -2, 3, -1, 1, and 0, 1/3. So my graph taking a big drop, and then all of a sudden starts going slow. Let me zoom out. One thing I want to say. Notice, like I said, we always read the graphs from left to right. When my ratio was more than 1, I'm looking at questions 33 to 36. When my ratio was more than 1, my graph went up. Again, from left to right. When my ratio was less than 1, look, it went down. So I call decay. That means it goes down. Use the list to create your graphs.